Hello, my name is Sinead and I'm a Student Recruitment and Outreach Officer at the University of Westminster. So each year I help hundreds of students with their UCAS personal statements, and today I'm hoping to help you as an Access student with yours. So I'm going to talk about what to include, how you can use being an Access student to your advantage, and include plenty of examples throughout. So I encourage you to take notes throughout the session and go back through the video, as I think there'll be some really valuable information for you. So first of all, pick your favourite puppy. Got one? So you could have chosen any similar or very cute, but you were drawn to one in particular. So this is the same for personal statements. So law is a very popular subject. So admissions tutors, that's the university staff deciding if they're going to offer you a place on the course, will read through hundreds of applications from students that are all very similar in terms of their backgrounds and the qualifications that they're studying. So the personal statement is your chance to show your personality and make you stand out from the other students. So let's take a look at how you can use being an Access student to your advantage. So we all know the most common entry route to university is an 18-year-old straight out of sixth form or college, but that doesn't always mean that they make the best students. So as an Access student, you're generally older and more mature. For whatever reasons, you decided education wasn't for you at that stage in your life. So you've got greater life experiences and challenges that you've overcome. So whether you've been working, travelling, looking after children, whatever reasons for the break in your education, you're going to have more to draw on versus a student straight from school. And hopefully that means clearer career goals. And because you've got a vision of what you'd like to in the future, and I'll point out that it's okay if you haven't got that completely figured out yet, universities are going to know that you're going to university for the right reasons. So not just because your teachers have said it's the right thing to do straight after school, but because you want to better yourself and put the work in to get to where you want to be. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the guidelines because this is all available online. I mean, your teachers will cover it anyway, but I'll just touch on the basics. So you're going to write one statement that you'll submit to all of your choices. So just bear that in mind when you're thinking of the content. And it's a maximum of 4,000 characters, and that includes spaces and punctuation. So equals about a page of writing, single spaced. Now, a page really isn't that much, so you want to make sure that you're being concise throughout. And one important thing to stress is that there's no spelling check on UCAS. So just you're writing it on Word to the subject, and also get feedback from teachers just to make sure everything's correct. Now, the official UCAS deadlines are the 15th of October for Oxbridge, and then the 15th of January for most of the courses. However, please double check with your college, because they will set an internal deadline a few weeks before these dates, and that gives them a chance to make sure everything's okay and to add on their reference. It won't be sent to universities until the teacher's reference is added on, so don't expect to send it to them on the 14th of January, and they'll have it done by the 15th. Make sure you're sticking with their deadlines. And for anyone that's going to be taking the LNAT exam, and that's required by some higher tier universities, you also need to make sure that you're going to be managing your time effectively, because revising for that exam alongside doing the work for your Access course and also completing the UCAS application can really mount up. So just make sure you're being aware of that. So the admissions tutors will usually look at your application in this order. So first of all, they're going to look at your predicted grades to make sure you meet the entry requirements, and also look at the reference from your college. And then they'll take a look at your previous qualifications and work experience, so what you've been doing since you've been out of education. And then they're going to take a look at your personal statement. So your personal statement is really the only section that you have full control over. So in terms of structure, you want to make sure you structure it like an essay. So you've got a clear beginning, just going to draw the reader in, a middle that builds up your argument of why you're the perfect candidate, and a strong ending to reiterate your points. So your main focus throughout should always be on your enthusiasm and academic interest in the subject. And this percentage will differ between your institutions, but if you're looking at a higher tier university, you always want to make sure you're aiming for at least 75% to be based on your academic interest and enthusiasm. And you might think that sounds like a lot considering you've only just started your course, but I'll talk about what you can include later on. So when it comes to writing everything down, a common mistake that students make is describing everything that they've done, but not reflecting on it to show how it makes them the perfect student. So I could say I really like helping people. So I decided to volunteer at college to help students with their work. So obviously that's a good start, but I don't think it's as good as it could be. I'll come back to that example in a bit once I've explained the ABC method. So A stands for activity. So think about what you've done. So that could be parts of your access course, what you've been doing for work, maybe a book that you've read. And then B, you want to think about what the benefit of that activity was. So what skills did you develop? This is where you're really going to reflect on what the experience gave you. And then the important bit that most students forget to do, how does this activity and the skills that you've gained show that you're suitable for the course? So remember, the personal statement is you showing your suitability for the course. So referring back to that should always be the main focus. So here's an example of that in action, thinking back to me saying I was interested in helping students in college. So here you can see students spoken about volunteering at college, which has developed the interpersonal skills, and they've done a really good job actually of explaining how this will link to a career in law. So just a little tip for you, because if you haven't got as much experience because you've probably only just started your access course, I'd suggest pursuing a couple of free online courses such as MOOCs. So this is a page full of free courses run by universities all around the world. I'll show you the website. So if you go on mooc.org, it'll take you to the EDX website, and here you can search based on your subject area. If I went in for law, you can see there's over 146 courses run by universities all over the world. And this is where you can really show your interest in the subject. Obviously, looking through this list, there's probably one or two that'll scream out to you, and then that'll differ from what other students are interested in. So it really will show your personality based on what you've chosen. And as I said, these courses are free. You can pay for a certificate if you want to at the end, but it's just a good place to have some talking points to show the universities that you've taken your interest outside of the classroom. So I'll go through it section by section now. So just to note, there's not a set structure that you have to follow. This is just a simple format that I recommend, but you might find something else that works better for you. This is just a good starting point. So first of all, we're going to have the introduction. So just like meeting someone in a job interview, pleased to meet you, and your first impression really does count. So you want to grab the reader's attention, get your passion right across. So first of all, we have the introduction. So just like greeting someone in a job interview, you're pleased to meet you, your first impression really does count. So you want to grab the reader's attention and get your passion across right from the get-go and tell the reader why you want to study law. And as an access student, you also want to answer the question of why now? So think about what's led you to the decision to re-enter education and law in particular. Now, one of the dangers of trying to come up with a great opening sentence is that you can end up overthinking it and going overboard. So there's a number of opening sentences that are completely overused that we really want to avoid. So things like, from a young age, I've wanted to be a lawyer, or I've always been interested in the subject of law. This is really boring. It's not very sincere. You weren't born wanting to be a lawyer. So it's not going to grab the reader's attention at all. You're frankly going to send them to sleep. So in order to make the opening lines catchy, you want to start with something that's unique about you. So I always suggest that students use an interest and personal reason that's led them to pursue law, or maybe an unusual experience that offers them a different perspective. So just remember, we don't need your life story, and there's no selection criteria for being witty, so just make sure you're keeping it relevant. Now, one tip I have for you is to write your introduction last so you don't get stuck. So this section is often the trickiest for students because you put so much pressure on getting it perfectly. So you don't want to end up focusing too much on it and neglect the rest. So I say do the other sections and then come back to your introduction with a fresh mind. Okay, so as I previously said, your academic interest in the subject should make up the biggest part of your statement. So you want to tell the reader what you enjoy about the subject, how you're prepared for academic study, and how your current course links with your degree course. So as you've likely only just started, you might not have much to talk about. So this is where supracurricular activities come in. Now this is anything you've done outside of your course to deepen your understanding in the subject. So it could be a book you've read, case files, court visits, TED Talks, podcasts, MOOCs, like we spoke about earlier. And it's just a great way to make your personal statement personal, as an area that you're interested in is probably different from another applicant, so it really can make you stand out. You don't need loads of this, but if you just spend a couple of hours each week, you could have some great things to talk about and it'll help you prepare for university, as there's a big focus on independent study there. So it's going to benefit you in the long run, really. So you just want to make sure that you're always using a reliable source. So if you look on websites like Google Scholar or books written by experts in the field, a couple of suggestions I always have could be Letters to a Law Student by Nicholas McBride, and also Is Eating People Wrong? Great Legal Cases and How They Shape the World by Alan Hutchinson. You obviously might have some books you've already read, which would be great things you can include in there. So let's look at another example. So this student's done really well to comment on how the access course has benefited them thus far. So it can be difficult because if you just started your access course in September, you might not have much to talk about, but that's where extra reading can be really beneficial. So they've spoken about the skills it's given them, link that briefly to the course. So then I'd expect them to talk about some supracurricular activities, because this isn't necessarily specific to law, but just access in general, but it's a great start. So then we want to talk about what your work experience, what you've been doing whilst you're out of education. We don't need everything. You know, if you've been out of education for 10 years, it's going to be a lot to write down in 4,000 characters. So just select a couple of things and talk about them in more detail. Okay? And also universities know that not everyone can secure work experience at, you know, a law firm or in Parliament. What we're more interested in is what you've learned from any opportunity. So whether that's volunteering at your local church, working in retail, as long as you focus on the transferable skills you've gained, like teamwork or communication, it can be a great experience to draw on. So you can also talk about your extracurricular activities here, but I do suggest only talking about them if it's relevant. Okay, don't feel like you have to put it in just because your college gives you a help sheet which includes extracurricular activities in there. I read through a lot of statements that will be really good, and then at the end they'll say something like, I like reading, cooking and hanging out with my family. Now that doesn't show how you're suitable for the course. Okay, so I'd just say that most people, you'd be better off utilising the word count to talk in more detail about your work experience or academic interest. And just remember throughout, you want to make sure you're using the ABC method. So here's an example of that. And so this student's talking about their role as a sales assistant. In my opinion, they probably could have been a bit more detail in relating it to the course, but it's still a pretty solid paragraph. Hopefully give you some good inspiration. Okay, and then your conclusion, that's really your second first impression. So you don't want your statement to end up falling short at the end as if you've got bored and thought that's enough. You want to really focus on it and write 2 to 3 strong sentences to remind the reader why you're right for the course and reaffirm your ability and determination to succeed. So if you haven't already, this can be a good place to talk about your career aims. You know, if you know exactly that you want to go into a certain area of law, you can make that clear here or earlier on in the paragraph. So here's an example of a really good conclusion. So what I liked about this is that the student actually linked it back to the introduction. So in their introduction, they spoke about life growing up in Singapore, and how that gave them an insight into law's central position in society. So they were talking about a personal experience which drew the reader in, and at the end of this statement they've gone full circle and grabbed the reader's attention again, talking about that experience. So in this conclusion, I like how they're showing really a good understanding of the different topics that they're interested in. and they're reaffirming to the reader that they're going to give 100% to the degree and get the most out of it. And they also mention some long-term career goals, so you can see that they're being forward-thinking also. So overall, I'd say that's a really strong conclusion. So just to recap on all of that. So you want to have a strong introduction to tell the reader why this subject and why now. And you want to talk about your academic interest inside and outside of the classroom, what you've been doing whilst out of education and the skills that you've gained. And then you want to that in 2 to 3 sentences. So remember, it's not a set structure that you have to follow. You might find something else that suits you and your experience better. Some people begin by talking about their work experience, as that's what might have inspired them to pursue higher education. Some go straight into an interesting case that they've been studying. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, so just see what works best for you. Okay, I appreciate that was quite a lot of information. It probably feels quite daunting to get started. So what I recommend doing is, first of all, you want to research the course. So think about the qualities and skills that the perfect law student would have and write all of these down. So think about keywords like communication, patience, determination, and these are the types of words that you want to weave into your personal statement. And next, you want to look at your own skill set and motivations. So think about everything that you've done. You probably won't use all of it, but it's just good to have, a bank of ideas that you can pull from. And then lastly, you want to cross-reference those two lists. So see how your own experience overlaps that with the perfect candidate. And if you think there's too many gaps, then that's where you could start doing some supercurricular activities and bring them into it. Okay, so some do's and don'ts. So write in your personal statement, you want to make sure that you do keep it personal. It's about you and your experiences. So if you're writing about a group project, just make sure that you're focusing on your ideas and contribution rather than the group as a whole. Make sure that you're being analytical and not just descriptive. So using the ABC method where you can. And keep it concise. So this is where redrafting is really going to help you, and make sure that you're not waffling on. And please do please your teachers, your friends and family, get their opinions, and because that'll really help you redraft it. And make sure that you don't lie or exaggerate. You don't want to say that you did work experience at a big law firm and it turns out the person reading your statement works there, and they bring it up in an interview and you've got nothing else to go on. And then equally, make sure that you don't copy anyone else. And that includes any of the examples I've used today. Because UCAS does have a plagiarism software, so it's going to check your statement against any others that have been submitted, and it will badly affect your application if you're caught. And also, don't overcomplicate your language. So yes, you do want to sound professional, but you also don't want to sound unnatural. I'm going to try and avoid using quotes. So you could paraphrase if you're referring to a book, but instead it'd be better to talk about your own opinion on it rather than quoting it. And lastly, don't include any irrelevant sob stories or flipping comments because you don't want to accidentally offend anyone. Okay, so I'll leave you with some useful resources. So UCAS has got a really nice toolkit to use and all the information you need and things like your deadlines. And we can also find examples of personal statements on websites like Student Room and Studential. I definitely recommend having a look at examples, give you some inspiration, but remember, don't copy any of them. Have a look at YouTube as well, because there's a lot of advice from universities and also students who've been there and done it. We do have a really great feedback service at Westminster, so you can send us a draft for courses that we offer, and we can give you feedback on that. So just email personalstatementhelp@westminster.ac.uk, and one of myself or one of my team will get back to you. Look at our website, www.westminster.ac.uk, and have a look at the courses we offer. We do accept access for all of our law courses, and the requirements will be on each individual course page. And the last bit of advice I want to offer you is a question. What can you do between now and submitting your application to enhance your personal statement? Okay, thank you for listening. I hope it's been really helpful.